We're going to look at a new type of loop today called the for loop. So what I've got at the moment is a while loop, and this while loop is designed to print out the numbers from 1 to 10. So we have a counter here. We have a while statement that continues whilst the counter has a value that is less than or equal to 10. What it then does is print out the value of the counter, and then it increments the counter by 1. So the first time we run it, the counter is 1. So this is true, it prints out 1, it puts it up to 2, this is true again, so on and so forth. Eventually, we'll get to 10, it will increment it to 11, counter will no longer be less than or equal to 10, and then the loop will end and the program will end. And if we run it, you'll see that the numbers 1 to 10 are printed out in the output. So there is one very sort of small issue with this type of loop, and that in that counter, if we only want to use it in the loop, still is available to us outside the loop, and sometimes we don't actually want that behavior. And also, it's quite often that we have a loop where we set something up at the beginning, we have some kind of condition that needs to be checked, and then we increment something like a counter when we do the loop. So there is a more convenient syntax for writing loops of that type, and that is called the for loop. Okay, so I'm going to comment this out so you can see it there for reference, and I'm going to create a for loop instead. So the syntax for loop uses the keyword for. We then have a bracket, and the first thing we do is declare the thing that's going to do the counting. So I'm going to put essentially the same code I had up here for int counter equals 1 in there. But rather than split up the condition and the increment, we can put them all in one sort of line. Okay, and we separate them with semicolons. So I'm going to say, here's my initialization statement. The next thing I want to do is my continue condition. So what do we want to be the case for the loop to continue? And in that case, it's counter is less than or equal to 10. So we'll take that code there, we'll paste that in there, and then the final thing we do is increment the counter. Okay, so we can take that code from there and put it in there. Okay, the thing we don't have though is a semicolon at the end of the final item. We just close the bracket instead, and then we have our braces just like we would otherwise have. So the only thing we'd therefore need, we've used this line of code, we've used that line of code, and we've got our continue condition, is just our print statement. So we can copy that from here, and we can run our code and see that we'll get exactly the same output that we had before. Okay, now if you've got any exposure to, if you've seen for loops in the past, you might have realized that actually they don't necessarily look quite like this. And that's because it's very often that the counter that we're using actually represents an index, so the position of something that we're looking at. So we might use a variable name index, but actually very often that is shortened to I. Okay, so what you'll probably more commonly see is a for loop where you've got the counter named I. Okay, so I've changed it to I now. Okay, this is probably more familiar if you've seen for loops before as to what it looks like. There is no difference, it's just that I'm using I as a variable name instead of counter. So if I run it, I get the exact same behavior. And there you go, that's probably the simplest form of for loop that we have.